All right, good afternoon. We have with us, besides our facilitators, Andrew and Hugh, we have, as far as I can tell, Emerson, Joy, Jeanette, and Alavo. So welcome, you students. We'll get underway here. Just a few quick announcements is that this is the second to the last webinar. We'll have one more webinar next week, which will be Tuesday, July 16th. And then we'll give you basically a couple of weeks after that to correct any outstanding work, make sure that if there's any issues or questions you have, we can get those answered. And then ideally on the 2nd of August, we'll have our virtual graduation. Those of you that are on the call are doing pretty well as far as keeping up with homework. Others who will watch this recording at a later date, you have a lot of catching up to do. Really hope you're able to get your work done and let us know if you have issues so that we can solve those problems. So I think you hear that every week from us, but we're still having a little bit of a challenge in getting everybody to stay up with the work. So after this particular webinar, we will have one more assignment and that'll be it. And so everything else will be catch up. All right. Anything else announcement-wise from Hugh or Andrew?
None from me. No.
All right. Well, without further ado, then I will turn it over to Mr. Hugh, and you can begin.
Right. Okay, everybody. Here we are. The progress to date is that we have created an MIS, and we've entered data into an MIS. We're producing some reports. You've been looking at some reports from an MIS. But so far, everything that you've done relates to standard information, which is fixed information which you must supply if you want to use the system. It's mandatory, okay? Things like number of women, total savings to date, and so on and so on, okay? Now, many organizations want to include other information, usually because a donor may call for that information, or it may be that they're an organization that wants to, for their own reasons, keep track of other things. For example, an agroforestry project might want to know if a group has got a tree nursery, okay? Or a health project might want to know how many members have been vaccinated. Those would be data that are required by a project, but they're not required by the system, but they can be added into the system. And we call them user-defined fields. So let me just go on to the PowerPoint, and we'll see what there we are, right? And I pray to God this is going to work. There we are. How about that? Okay. Now I probably have to do the usual, which is to, yes, here we are, right? Okay. So this is module 6.1. There are two parts to this module, but the first part that we're looking at is user-defined fields. So let me just get rid of that, move that off to one side. Right. So we have two types of user-defined fields. These are fields which you want, but which are not required necessarily by the system. We have two types. We have what we call standard data fields, and we have user-created fields. Now, standard data fields, let me explain the difference between them, okay? Because standard data fields and user-created fields are all going to be fitted under user-defined. And that must sound a bit confusing because I've used the word standard here. But let me be clearer about it. Here's a diagram. We have two different types of user-defined fields, standard data fields and user-created fields. Now, until now, we've only considered fixed data fields, which are mandatory, but User-defined fields are optional, so you don't have to have them, and are either selected or created by the MIS administrator, who either selects them from a pre-formatted standardized list or creates them from scratch and does the formatting themselves. Now, that's an important point. Standard data fields, therefore, they exist on the system. You can select them and choose them. They're pre-formatted in terms of the wording, the type of data, whether it's a percentage or a text field. It's all pre-prepared for you. But they are optional in the sense that you don't have to choose them. They're not required. And they have user-created fields, which are they're not part of the standard data fields. They're things you have decided for yourselves. And that could be something like, let's say, number of widows or number of cows owned by members. Those would be an example of user-created fields that are they're not part of the standard data field set. Now, they have to be created by the MIS administrator because they will appear in all projects. So it can't be something that you do at the project level. It's not something created by the project administrator, but by the MIS administrator. Okay. And user-defined fields appear on the data entry screens, as I've said, of all projects in an MIS. Okay, let's take that a bit further. What shows up on the data entry screens? Okay, so what do we have here? We have under standard data fields. They can be chosen by MIS administrators or network administrators. We'll get to networks later. Or you can have standard data fields that are chosen only by the MIS administrator, or standard data fields chosen by the network administrator. Now, I haven't concentrated on networks, and for the moment, I want you just to ignore that, okay? But if you're the MIS administrator, you can select standard data fields, which will show up in your data entry screens for all of your projects. But if your projects are part of a network, then the network administrator would select standard data fields, and they would also show up. But in this webinar, we're only covering standard data fields chosen by the MIS administrator. Now, on the right-hand side here, we have the same thing. It's user-created fields from the MIS administrator or user-created fields from network administrator. So here we have both types of data show up in a single screen, classified into standard data fields and user-created fields. So it's like it shows up on one screen, okay? You enter the data on one screen, which is UDFs classified into those two areas. And if you select a standard data field, okay, as MIS administrator, and a network manager chooses the same standard data field, it will only show up once. You only have to enter the data once, and the result will show up in both places. Okay. Now let's just take a look at how we set standard data fields. Okay. What are they and how to set them up? Okay. Let's go into some detail here. Okay. All right. Standard data fields, let's go into the history. Standard data fields were created after we've been running the Savix MIS for a year. There were no standard data fields, only user-defined fields. So until that time, there were no standard data fields, but we reviewed the user-defined fields that users had created, and we found the ones that were the most frequently used. Okay, we said, okay, because they're very common, they're always being asked for, let's make them standard so that they can be selected as a standard data field. Okay, and we did that because that meant you didn't have to worry about spelling mistakes or worrying about the best format. So once the most popular fields that have been selected by the users are identified, we put them into 5 categories. Group details, age of members, education and training, income generating activities, and interactions with financial institutions. Somebody has their microphone unmuted and it's a lot of scraping noise. Would you check to make sure your microphone is off? Okay. Right. So when you get into those 5 categories, there's a number of data points in each one that can be selected. So we say, please review pages 5 and 6 of the attached Word manual, and the following slides will show you how to open them. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what those look like, okay? So I'm breaking out of this for the moment. Where am I? Hold on, just close that down, and I stop sharing, and I go back here and go into my manual. Okay, now here we have the standard, we have the user-defined fields, and we have the same chart I'm showing here, standard data fields. So here are the 5 categories. They show up on your screens. We'll get into that later, but I just want to show you what they look like. So education and training. It says, have you received SPM training, or received financial education training, received gender training, received child rights training, number of members who received SPM training, and so on and so on. Then we have financial interaction, institution interactions, how far to a partner financial service provider branch, date of opening an account at partner financial service provider, group has taken a financial service provider loan, and so on. Then we have group details, which is the name of the community or village, parish, location, sub-county, district, group telephone number, chairperson's name, and so on. There's quite a long list of things which will give you details on the group. Then we have list of income generating activities, number of members who run an enterprise, number of females who run an enterprise, number of members of retail business, manufacturing, transport, livestock, and so on. And then we have stuff which has to do with age of members here. So these are all standardized, and all you have to do is click on them, and they will automatically show up as a standard data field. There are 78 possible group standard data fields. Okay, now, so let me just close that down, stop sharing, and go back to my PowerPoint. We'll actually be setting them up when we shortly. Now, did I close my PowerPoint? I think oh no, here we are, right, here we are, good. Okay, so let's go to the next slide and consider standard data fields. Now, I'm going to give you a warning. There are 78 possible standard data fields. So the first rule is, what is really important to you for you to know? One of the big problems that we have with user-defined fields is people say, oh, when they see a standard data field, they say, oh, it would be nice to know that, or it would be nice to know this. And they end up with a huge long list of information, okay? Instead of starting out by saying, what do we really need to know? And then selecting data points from the standard data fields, they tend to say, oh, let's review this list and see what we want. And I think that's the wrong way to go about it. If you're going to create extra data fields, you have to remember somebody is going to have to collect the data, somebody is going to have to enter the data, and so you could end up with a huge long list, but in fact you really are not, it's not that important to you. So start out by saying what really matters. So the second rule is to select or create the least number of standard data fields to achieve this, okay? All right. Now, because don't forget, the field officer is going to have to collect this data, but that's not really his or her job. The field officer is supposed to be training groups, not running around acting as a researcher. So keep it to the minimum. So it also increases the workload and it reduces the possibility that serious analysis will take place. Because if I'm having to enter lots and lots and lots of data, how much time am I going to have available to analyze it? Okay. Somebody once said to me, well, what's important to me, for example, is when I'm crossing the road, what's important? Well, I look right and I look left to make sure I'm not going to get killed. That's the key data. Okay, I don't necessarily look at the color of the sky and what direction the wind is coming from. I'm looking for traffic. So it's a question of focusing on the key things that really matter. And I personally would never create more than 15 data points combined across standard data fields and user created fields, unless the MIS is a pure research project. Therefore, use a golden rule. Less is probably more. Okay, and in my opinion, user-defined field data is collected only once or at most twice a year. So for example, if you have as part of your user-defined data, what is the chairperson's telephone number, you're not going to be collecting that every time you go and collect data. You'll usefully do it probably once a year. Or let's say, how many members of the group are widows? Okay, well, that would be something you might only collect very, very occasionally. Okay. Therefore, before the MIS administrator starts to pick and choose standard data fields and to create user-created fields, it is vital to sit as a team and decide what you must know and identify the smallest number of data points necessary. Now, I'm banging on about this because I have a lot of experience with projects where they start out with 25 user-defined fields. And after 6 months, they say, gosh, this is killing us. You know, it's a huge amount of data to collect, and they cut it back. So start out from the perspective, from the first point, what do you really need to know? Has the donor required this of you? Is it key to the thing you're most heavily involved in, like health, for example? Are there some key indicators that you as an institution need? So think about it. Okay, I'm not going to say anything more about that, but don't add user-defined fields unless they really serve a purpose. Okay, now let's get on to the practicalities. How do you select a standard data field? Okay. Well, when you log on as the MIS administrator, you see here MIS administrator. Okay, you click on MIS configuration. Okay, and then you click on Group UDF. In other words, Group User-Defined Fields. Okay. Then you have two blank categories appearing under User-Created Fields and Standard Data Fields. So the moment you click on MIS configuration, by default, it will go to Group UDF, and then you've got these two categories. Okay. It's normal to start first by working with standard data fields before you get onto user-created fields. Okay. And then you click first on Manage Standard Data Fields. So that's the key point. Go to MIS configuration, go to Group User-Defined Fields, and go to Manage Standard Data Fields. Okay. And when you click on that, okay, you come into a screen, okay, where you have the different categories of standard data fields. So you have, as I say, 78 standard data fields, but they're organized into different categories. And here we're showing group details, and it's showing here, in this particular case, it's showing the beginning of the list, which is the screen displays Manage Standard Data Fields, and then it defaults to group details with a few metrics showing. There are many more, but these are ones you can choose from. Okay. All right. Right. So carrying on, the MIS administrator in this particular case selects name of community or village. This transfers the selection to the top of the list and creates a black line underneath it to indicate that it is now selected. You see this black line? It's a bit difficult to see. The MIS administrator then decides that this must be mandatory, you see here. and clicks on the mandatory checkbox, okay? Which means that if you make it mandatory, you cannot save your data set unless you've collected or entered that data, okay? And then the selection is then saved. So now you've selected name of community or village. Right, then you just carry on. Select. So here you see name of community or village is now above the black line, and it says it's selected and it says it's mandatory. Then we select the chairperson's telephone number. Okay. The MIS administrator then clicks add to my list. Yeah. But decides they're not going to make it mandatory. Maybe that person doesn't have a telephone. Then the MIS administrator then decides they will select 2 other fields, and they will be number of members who run an enterprise and saving under the income generating tab. And savings group has account at partner FSP, which is under the financial interactions tab here. Okay. So here you see we've selected name of community or village, chairperson's telephone number, number of members who run an enterprise, and savings group has account at partner FSP. All right. So here we are. Okay, so going back to the screen, the basic screen, now you see we have selected these 4 fields, and it's a bit difficult for you to see because it's quite faded, but you see that name of the community or village is mandatory. That's it. You have created your standard data fields. Jeanette, could you turn off your microphone, please? Okay. The screen shows this final selection of 4 standard data fields. Note that only the name of the community village field is mandatory, although it isn't very clear on this screen. Okay, and then once this selection is completed, the MIS administrator then decides, okay, those are the standard data fields I want, but there's some other stuff I want which does not appear on the standard data fields. And what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to start off before I create user-created fields. I have to decide what categories I'm interested in. So, for example, let's go to that. So I'm going to have to manage categories. So if I'm going to have a number of user-created fields, I want to sort them into categories. For example, I could have a category which is called okay, here we are. Well, standard data fields are already arranged in categories. When working with user-created fields, these have to be created by the MIS administrator. In the case of our example, the 2 fields we want to create are agreed to represent vulnerability. So we create a vulnerability category. Here we are. So having clicked on Manage Use, let me just go back a bit and remind you where this comes from. Okay, I click on Manage Categories, okay? Now moving forward. Yeah, when I click on that, I then simply type in vulnerability, okay? This screen is entitled Manage User-Defined Categories, there. And then you type in vulnerability. In the new category box, you click on Add and then Save, okay? And that will create the category that you need in which to organize your user-defined fields, okay? Right, so here I've already created the category, although it doesn't show here, but I click now Create UCF, Create User Created Field. So here what I've done, when I click that, it opens up, and you'll see here what I've done, the screen shows the field name, and I've selected number of widows, okay? I can then make a description, which you'll notice is optional, and it's not often needed, but in this case, we've said number of members who are widows. Then we select the category, which is vulnerability, from a drop-down list. And then the data type. Now, be careful here. Selecting the right type of data is important. You will have a drop-down list which says percentages, number, text, and so on. And be careful and think about it very carefully, because, for example, if you select a telephone number and you put number, it won't work, because you will have a whole bunch of commas, which are normal for numbers but not normal for telephones. Telephones often have spaces and they have plus signs and so on and so forth. So you have to select what data type you're going to have. Okay. So these are the data options are calendar, percentage, drop down, number, radio button, and multi-select and text field. Okay. Note that only numbers, and now here's an important point. When you're creating user-defined fields, you have to think about how you're going to use them. Now, if you're going to use them you want them to, if they're going to be really useful to you, the only data that is going to show up in all your upper level reports is going to be numerical data and percentages. Okay, so for example, if I say number of groups, that will show up at the level of trainers. Okay, and it will show up at, that's not a very good example. Let me give you another example. If I put telephone number of group, well, that's data which will show up at the level of the group. Okay, but it won't show up at the level of the field officer, because then the field officer may have 20 groups. But if I say, let's say number of widows, that will show up at the group level, but it will also show up at the trainer performance level, and it will show up at trainer comparison report. So if you want these upper level reports, the user-defined fields have to be numerical or percentages. Okay, and so number and percentages are the most commonly used. You'll see that when we get to the reports themselves. Okay, right. So then we move on. Then next thing is you then decide whether you want it to be decimalized or not. So obviously, if you're talking about number of widows, you're not going to have a decimal place for a widow. Okay, it's going to be a whole number. You decide whether it's going to be mandatory or not, and you decide whether or not you're going to validate the data. This is not very often needed. It's only in the case of where you set an upper and lower limit. In most cases, that's to be ignored. And then a very important field is keeping the value of the previous data set in the field. Now, here's a very important point. If I enter the data into a field and I save it, the next time I come to enter data into my system, do I want that old data to be there, or do I just want the data entry fields to be blank? And it's a very good idea to keep them in the field, because in most cases for user-defined fields, they won't have changed, and you don't want to constantly be adding the same data again. Okay, so it's usually a good idea to retain data from a previous data set on the user-created field data entry fields, because a lot of these data may not change very often. Okay. Now, formatting a user-created field, okay? Okay, so, where is it? Okay. Okay, now, this is only selected if this is an important point, okay? It says here, value to add to pre-existing records, optional. Now, let me explain. If you're starting out with a brand new project, you don't have to fill in anything here, because you've already put this user-created field in right from the beginning. But let's say you're a year into your project and you want to add a user-created field, so you do that. But then in your previous data sets, all the places where that new field will open up is going to be empty, because you never filled it in because it didn't exist. So here we just put a value to add, and in this particular case we're saying 0. So they'll show up now in pre-existing records. Right? So yeah. So the final appearance of our user-created field table is this. Okay. The summary shows the selections made for both user-created fields and for standard data fields. These data entry fields will show up in all projects. Now notice, by the way, here we've got the category of vulnerability, the data type being a number. Okay. They'll show up in all projects in an MIS and can be created both by the MIS administrator or the network administrator. Next, how they show up on data entry screens. So you've created your user-defined fields, you've created your standard data fields, and you've created your user-created fields. So how do they show up on the data entry screens? Well, here we have the data entry tab for all user-defined fields appear, or I'll just get rid of that, appear automatically. Okay, user-defined field. So you have this tab here saying user-defined field. You've got your static data, your cycle data, your data set. Now you have your user-defined fields. So when clicked, both user-created fields and standard data fields appear. So these are the ones we selected, and this is the ones we created, and this is the ones down here that we selected. And you can see here, data has been entered. Okay. Now notice here the chairperson's telephone number. When I was telling you, be careful, don't use number, use text, because you can see that that would not work if that was a regular number. And then here's an important point, which is something we aren't really touching on at this point. When you're a member of a network, and you're also you have an MIS administrator who has created user-created fields. If by any chance the network administrator and the MIS administrator select the same standard data field, you don't have to worry. You don't have to enter the data twice. It will only show up once, although the result will go to both the MIS administrator and to the project and to the network administrator. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to break off from the PowerPoint. Okay. I'm going to close the PowerPoint, and I'm going to take you into the MIS itself. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create those user-defined fields so that you see how it's done, and it's a lot, it's fairly straightforward. Okay, so in this particular case, I'm going to log on to this is Maendeleo, Tanzania, and I am where is A? There we are. My username is SMDP Online A at gmail.com. And my password is smdp.online A exclamation mark. Let's hope that works. Yes, I'm in. So I now go to MIS configuration. I go to standard data. I go to my standard data fields. Manage standard data fields. Now I'm going to start off with name of community or village, and I'm going to make it mandatory. Okay, and I add to my list. Make it mandatory. Chairperson's telephone number, click on that one, add to my list. Okay, then I'm going to go to number of members who run an enterprise. That means I have to go now to my income generating activity list. Number of members who run an enterprise, add to my list. And then savings group has an account. I'm going to financial institution interactions, and I have savings group has account of partner FSB. Let's see. Here we are. Add to my list. Got to get this out of the way, and I'm going to have to save all this. Information has been saved. I've got a sneaking suspicion. There we are. So now I've selected all four. I've got my standard data fields. Now I'm going to create my user-created fields. I'm clicking on Manage My Category, and I'm going to call this Vulnerability. Okay, click Add, and I save. And then I'm actually going to create a user-created field, and I'm going to say number of widows. Description, number of members who are widows. Category, I've only got one category, so that's easy, vulnerability, and my data type is number. Okay, and I'm going to make, this is not mandatory, so that's fine. And I'm not going to validate it, and I'm going to keep the data in the fields, so I save it. Right, now I'm going to create my second one, and that is number of female headed households. So again, this is number of members who are female heads of household. Category is vulnerability. Data type is number. It's not mandatory, and I save. Right. Okay, so now I've created two user-created fields, and I've got standard data fields here. Now, if I want to see what that looks like on my data entry fields, I log out, and I log back in as project administrator. Sign in. Now, when I go to data entry, and I go, let's say, to Umoja Group, and I view my data sets, and I go to edit, you will now see that in addition to the normal static data, cycle data, and data sets, I have the user-defined fields. And here they are. Vulnerability. I just say user-created fields under the category vulnerability. So number of female-headed households, let's say 3. Number of widows, 4. Group details, Ralang Village. Chairperson's telephone number, 0722 746 353. Number of members who run an enterprise, 7. Savings group has account at partner FSB. I'm going to put no, okay? And then I save it. Okay, that date is correct. I accept that and let's save. Okay, there we are. So now I have user-defined fields. Now, if I go back and then I go in again and I say view data sets, okay, and no, sorry, as you were, and let me go back and I say, if I decided to say add a data set, okay, I can confirm that. When I go to my UDFs, you will see, because we said leave the data in the fields, there it is, it's left in the fields. If I'd said don't leave it in the fields, those would be blank. Okay, so I'm going to cancel that, discard the data. There we have it. So that's basically fairly straightforward. If I can just reiterate that you create your user, you select your standard data fields as MIS administrator. You create categories for user created fields, and then you create the user created fields as MIS administrator, and then it automatically shows up in your data entry screens. Okay, so let me just close that or quit that. Okay, and stop sharing. Go back to my PowerPoint. Where are we? Right. Where is that PowerPoint? I hope it's there somewhere. Oh, I think I have to start it all over again. Just a minute. Yeah, okay, just a minute. Okay. Close that, then go back in, share. Now we just have to hope it's shown up. Yes, here we are. Okay, so to reiterate, we've been through the whole process of creating user-defined fields as standard data fields and as user-created fields in their own categories. Right, now let's see how they appear in reports, okay? All right. Now, reports in which user-defined fields show up. User-defined fields do not show up in the project management reports, the project performance report, benchmark report, or trends report. In other words, the project management reports don't have user-defined fields. Those are all standardized, okay? Only numerical and percentage UDF show up in the trainer comparison report and trainer performance reports, since these call for aggregation of numerical and percentage values. So for example, if a trainer comparison report, you want to know number of widows, that is obviously an aggregation of several groups, okay? So numerical values will show up. But if you had something like, let's say, name of village, that wouldn't show up, okay? So you have to understand that other than group level reports, it's only percentages and numbers that show up at any higher level, okay? Right. All user-defined fields show up in group comparison reports. Okay. So, for example, chairperson's name or chairperson's telephone number, that will show up where you are comparing groups. So the individual group information is showing, then it will show up. Right. Now, two standard data fields that will appear in the trainer comparison report. So here I am, user-defined field, okay? Now, for example, here, we've got these standard data fields that you've selected, okay? Now, only two of those are going to show up in the trainer comparison report, and they are these here. Sorry, this is wrong. Okay, all other fields are non-numerical and won't show up in the, I'm sorry, this is a mistake. The share value will not show up in the trainer comparison report, or nor the yes, they will because they're numerical, but these won't. Okay. Right. So, for example, here's an example of a trainer comparison report where you have number of groups all showing up, and you have the loan interest rate showing up. Okay. This is because this is the average loan interest rate for each one of these people's groups. And this is the total number of groups here. Okay, and this is the average here. So this is average loan interest rate. This is total number of groups. These will show up. Okay. Okay, so that is basically the end of the webinar, and I have to open it up now for queries and questions. I would point out this. As I said, going back to one of the earlier statements I made, you should only really create user-defined fields after you've had a big discussion. And the discussion should involve managers of the project, but it should also involve some field staff, because they will have experience as to knowing whether or not it is practical to create certain kinds of user-defined fields. Stick with the principle that you create the minimum number of user-defined fields. Your hand may be forced by donors who say they require it, okay? But you should be also guided by your field staff as to the practicability of getting some of this information. Okay, some of it can be very sensitive, for example. I mean, a donor who is financing a project which is all about HIV and AIDS may find that field staff are reluctant to inquire of people within groups what their HIV status is, or whether they're in receiving ARVs. So you do have to have a consultative process before you create user-defined fields. So bear those things in mind, but do bear in mind that the more you create, the harder it is to, and the more work that is involved in collecting the information. Okay, so I'm done. Now I'm ready for any questions.
There's a question from Joy, and she says, if the user-defined fields don't show up in the reports unless they're numerical, is there any way to get or summarize the non-numeric data?
Yes. The simple answer to that is yes. Let me just. I think this is probably quite important. Let me go into a particular project. Okay. I'm going to have to log on again. That's a very good question. Where are we? Let's see. I'm going to have to create. Let me just see now. I'm not sure you can see my screen right now. Is that correct? You're not seeing it?
No.
Okay. Let me just go and see. I'll dig it out now.
You have to share a screen.
Yeah, I know. I'm just I'm getting quite slick at this now. Here we are. Right. Okay, so let's take VSL Associates Tanzania, all right? And then I go to admin 1. All right. Now this is a project with some data, and it hasn't got much user-defined data in it, but it's a good place to begin. Okay. Now, there's two things. First of all, if I go to operational reports and I go to group comparison, okay, my group comparison will allow me to, so I put chairperson's name, telephone number, district, name of community or village. These are all standard data fields, and only one of them is numerical. Number of members. Okay. Okay. I'm creating a report now, and I'm going monitored by all. And that's it. I'm going to run the report. Close that. Hide that. Okay. Yeah. Right, now we just have to hope it shows up. Okay. 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 This is very interesting, because here you'll notice this is a good example because we didn't add much data into this. But you'll notice here that we've got two items, which is Nyeri and Hanang, district name, and the name of the community is Magugu, and the village is Ralangvi. Okay. So here is an example of non-numerical data showing up in a group comparison report. It's a very limited example, I'm afraid. You see, okay, we've got a number of members who run an enterprise, a number of members who run an enterprise older than 6 months. Now, these two will show up in a, let's say, train a comparison report, because you're comparing, you get a total number of members who run an enterprise and total number of members who run enterprises older than 6 months. But you wouldn't get Nyeri and Hanang, because you can't get a total of Nyeri and Hanang and a total of Magugu and Ralang B. It's just you're comparing apples and oranges. So that's a very good example of showing where numerical data will show up, but non-numerical data won't show up in higher level reports. So the question was, well, how do I get that data? Well, actually, it's a little bit complex, but let me just go here and I go to data export. Okay, and I'm going to export the most recent data sets, and I can download an Excel file. And this will give me, over here, it gives me from here, from edit date. Now here we are from here. This is all user-defined fields. So here, for example, you can see we've got a lot of data here from one group here. We've got a bit of data from this group here, and so on and so forth.
Here we can't see the Excel file.
Sorry?
We can't see the Excel file.
Oh, you can't see the Excel file. Oh, darn it. Sorry about that. Let's see what I can do about that. I'm going to save it. Hold on. I have to save it on my desktop. Okay, desktop. Okay, copy of export. Right, there we are. All right, now I'm going to stop sharing on that one. And I have to go to, if I can find it, I hope it's there. Let's go to the bottom. Okay, it isn't showing up. Oh, that's a nuisance. Hold on a sec. I'm sure I can dig it out. Let me close that. Close that. Okay, it should show up now. Let me see if I can get it showing. Are you guys there? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
I see it.
Because I can't see anything right now. Just a minute. Okay, here we are. Right. Now I'm looking for something that says copy of. No, I'm sorry, I can't. It's simply not showing up, although it is on my desktop. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I think I know how to do it. Just a sec. I open it up, and I close it down there, and I go back to here. Oops, wrong one.
Are you sure you have screen sharing activated? Because
I'm pretty sure I'm going to share it now. Let's see. I've got my fingers crossed on this. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so when I do the export, here it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Now you'll see here along the top, when you do a data export, you've got the title of each item, which is the standard data. This is just the data entry, okay? So if let me just enlarge this a bit so that you can see it. Format column, auto fit column. Okay, so here we go. You see up here in the top, you have all the data items. Latitude, longitude, number of members at formation, cycle number, date saving started, and so on and so on and so on. Monitored by latitude, longitude, blah, blah, blah. Now I come along the end here, and I've got all my user-defined stuff. And you'll notice that most of it is numerical, okay? But here, whoops-a-daisy, I have the non-numerical stuff, okay? So here I've got these two groups which we've entered data on. I think there's 4 actually, but obviously there's going to be no totals. But this is where you can actually get your user-defined fields which are non-numerical. So I'm sorry about that very long-winded answer, but that's how you do it.
Great. Joy, does that answer your question?
Hello, Joy. We can't hear you.
Yes, it does. Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay.
Okay, so it is available to you, but as an export data file in Excel format.
This
All
might
right.
be a technical question.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
this might be technical, but there's not any API or other way to get data, right? It's just the download
Okay.
CSV.
Yes, good question. If you want to engineer an API access to the system, you can do that, but you have to do that by contacting our partners, the software group. They will help to engineer an API contact with the system. I mean, you could, for example, have an API which allowed you to enter the data using your own system, so long as you use the same data. Likewise, you can forge. You can have a linkage which allows you to an API linkage which would allow you to get this data, but you'd have to have that conversation with software group to be able to do that.
And Hugh can make that connection for you.
Yeah.
Great, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions out there? We appreciate the 7 of you showing up this afternoon.
One thing, I've got to go through the discussion and the exercise.
Go ahead.
Okay. So if there are no questions, we can move on to the assignment and the discussion. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay. All right. Last time I heard that was 35 years ago. Now, let's see. Okay, I'm going to go on now and I'm going to look at the assignments, okay? It's one assignment. I hope it's open. Yes, here we are. Now, it's a very simple assignment, okay? We're basically going to ask you to go to, I think, tell me if you can, oh, wait a minute, let me just push this down. I'm going to, oh, I seem to have made a mess of something. Just a minute, stop sharing. Okay, now I think I can do it. Here we are, right, assignment. All right. Okay, now the assignment is actually super simple. I'm going to ask you to open up your MIS, the one that you have using your credentials, and they're all Maendeleo, Tanzania, VSLA, MIS, and then it's with the suffix A to R. And the username is smtponline A to, actually that should be R, at gmail.com. With your password, which is going to be smtponline A exclamation mark to R exclamation mark. Okay? Hold on a second. Right. Okay. And then you go to MIS configuration. Okay. And then what we want you to do is we want you then to create, we want you to start off by creating a vulnerability category. Okay. And then create the 2 user-created fields. Then we want you to create the 4 SDFs listed, okay? And we don't want you to enter any data. Just create create those standard data fields, select them. Now here, what we want you to do is just to go through the 18 groups and enter dummy data, which looks likely to you. Just imagine it. There's only 2 items, number of widows and number of female-headed households. Enter data on those, okay? And if you think about it, it's likely that it's quite likely that if somebody is a widow, they're very likely to be a female-headed household. So, but somebody could be a female-headed household without being a widow because maybe they're divorced. So you're likely to have more female-headed households than widows. But think about that and go through your 18 groups and just enter the data. Practice entering the data under your user-created fields. Okay. So that's the exercise, to set this up and to enter data which you invent for yourself in the user-created fields. Okay? So that's that. And the discussion is a very simple discussion. Here we are. In the webinar on Tuesday, we demonstrated how user-defined fields are classified into standard data fields and user-created fields. It's quite complicated, okay? Once you get into it, and the demonstration I did in which I set up SDFs and UDFs is probably the best way of being sure that you do it right, okay? Before you undertake to participate in the discussion, we therefore request that you review the webinar, pencil in hand. So the purpose of this discussion is twofold. We're getting to the end of the course, so this is your last chance to be guided by us, okay? So we invite you to pose questions on this discussion related to any confusion at all about how you create user-defined fields, any queries on the reports, particularly operational reports. We are very sure that there are many questions that you have, and we invite you to put them up on the discussion so that everybody can benefit from your questions and clarifications. Both Andrew and I will be intensively involved, and we'll review the discussions daily in the evenings to answer your questions and provide clarifications. So this discussion is an important one, and we'll be watching it on a daily basis to make sure that if there is any uncertainties about user-defined fields and reports, that now's your chance to ask those questions, okay? Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, there was actually a question that came in from Victor, which was, his question was what is the advisable frequency of collecting UDF data annually or semi-annually, or depending on the data you want to track?
I think it depends. He's already given a very good answer. It depends on the data you want to track. For example, if you say name of village, you know, how often are you going to track that? You know, or name of the group, name of village, name of parish, or location, and so on and so forth. Much of these data very often only change quite occasionally. And bear in mind, by the way, that when it comes to it really does depend. If you think it's data that is likely to change very frequently, then you obviously have to collect it fairly frequently. But most user-defined field data, we recommend that you collect it once every 6 months or once every year, depending. Because let's say, for example, it's number of widows. Okay, it's not very likely that the number of widows are going to change that much in a 3 or 4 or 5 or a 6 month period. Maybe it changes once a year. So it depends upon you and the selection that you've made of user-defined fields to figure out what the frequency ought to be. But generally speaking, when it comes to user-defined fields, because these are data which are required by donors, which aren't covered by our standard data, you'll have to be guided by how frequently the donor requires you to provide it.
I could just add another comment on that here, because you mentioned earlier that some of this data will be picked by the system. It's you know, from the previous data collection. It will be there. So when a field officer collects the data, they will probably see what user-defined data is already being created. So they won't be changing. They'll just leave it the way it is.
Right. They'll be looking for changes. They'll be looking to see what is different from the last time they collected data.
Right.
All right. Thank you for the good questions, folks. And as we've said over and over again, we are here. Andrew and Hugh are able to walk you through this. Anything doesn't work when you're trying to do the homework. And we do urge you to do what you can to get caught up on all of your work, including, at least in one case, the self-assessment, which is required in order for people to pass the course. They have to complete both a pre-assessment and a post-assessment of the course as part of our evaluation that we're required to submit. So please do that. I also want to let you know that our final webinar session will be next week. It'll be on the 16th, same time as usual. And what we'll be doing is Hugh will be doing a review, and just to make sure that everybody has a good idea of what exactly we covered, and it'll be an opportunity for you to get any of your questions answered and get really things straightened out as best as possible, so that by the end of this course you really know how to use the SAVIX MIS system, that it really will be a benefit to your organization. So I think that's pretty much it. Do Andrew or Hugh have any final comments?
No, I'm just glad to see a few more people having shown up this week. That's great. Okay.
Yeah, and Kaite was out in the field. He just returned and joined us late, but he'll be able to look at everything on the recording. And the recording will go up in 2 or 3 hours, and I'll try to send everybody an email to let you know when it actually is available. So, all right. Well, again, thank you, Hugh, for great presentation as usual, and Andrew for your support, and all of you for showing up today. And have a great week, and we'll see you all again together next Tuesday for our final course webinar. So thanks, everybody. Good day.
Hey, Bill. Thank you, Hugh.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye.
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 Bye.